Hello, this is DNAJ, Divine Natural Ability Justified. What this video will be looking into is the 1013 events, whether they are ritualistic or whether they are synchronistic, or maybe thought to be ritualistic but synchronistic, all the same. But these are the events which took place in May of 2008. I listened to an interview with freemantv.com. I suggest you check out that website. It's a great website. Lots of really enlightening and thought-provoking radio shows on there which you can download for free. Make a donation. Now, in this interview, which you can find on my page, Freeman explains within this how he was able to predict the dates for 9/11 and how he later found other things which linked in, such as you have the Freemasonic cornerstone laying ceremonies for the Twin Towers and the Pentagon taking place on September the 11th in their respective years. Also added to this, you have George Bush Sr. in 1990 and again in 1991 on September the 11th, calling for a new world order in conjunction with the UN. And also you can check my video on here, which is 9/11 Beyond Coincidence, and that takes you further into all the information which was being shared and which I added to as well within my video. So let's take a listen to Freeman's perspective.
Mr. Freeman, you've mentioned the next date for the next 9/11 catastrophe.
Yes.
You've mentioned 10/12.
10/13.
10/13, so that would be the 13th of October.
Yes.
Would you elaborate a little more about this, please, and let us know what you know? Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, go ahead. That's a good question.
Sure.
Elaborate
I
on
was
that a
looking
little
into
bit.
the symbolism, and I predicted the date for 9/11. Well, then it was later that I found the cornerstone connection of 9/11. So I started looking for other significant cornerstones, and I came to the White House, and the White House's cornerstone was laid on 10/13. And, of course, I made the connection between Chris Carter giving us the whole truth about 911 in the Lone Gunman episode and his production company being 10/13. And 10/13 is the date that the Pope and the King came together and burnt the Templars at the stake. That's the infamous Friday the 13th. And so that is the date on the cornerstone of the White House. And so if they follow the same pattern, perhaps they will blow up the White House on 10/13.
And, of course, George Bush and Dick Cheney will conveniently not be there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so having heard this prediction, I myself look into the factors around 1013 and I find the following, which is just a roundup about the persecution in 1307. On October the 13th, 1307, what may have been all the Knight Templar in France were simultaneously arrested by agents of Philip the Fair, to later be tortured into admitting heresy in the order. The dominant view is that Philip, who seized the treasury and broke up the monastic banking system, was jealous of the Templars' wealth and power and sought to control it for himself. So, here you have the Templars who set up the modern day banking system being rounded up and burnt at the stake, executed. Okay. Now I'll go into something else which is interesting, which I found, because in about 2001 I read a book called The Second Messiah, and in this book the theory behind it is that the Shroud of Turin is actually the shroud of Jacques de Molay, who was the Grand Master of the Knight Templar, and that they performed like a torture in which they mock crucified Jacques de Molay. And what was interesting is what I found is the following. October the 13th, 1988, at a press conference held in Turin, the Archbishop of Turin makes an official announcement that the results of the 3 laboratories performing the carbon dating of the shroud have determined an approximate 1325 date for the cloth. At a similar press conference held at the British Museum in London, it is announced that the shroud dates between 1260 and 1390 AD. Newspaper headlines immediately brand the shroud a fake and declare that the Catholic Church has accepted the results. So there you have the dates for the Shroud of Turin coinciding with the time of the execution of the Templars, and also the infamous dates is there again by coincidence, synchronicity, ritual, whatever's going on. But there you go, all these things falling into place. And now let's bring it to the culmination of October the 13th, 2008. So, as this date was approaching, I'm thinking to myself, well, you know, something's possibly going to happen. As Freeman was alluding to, and going from his perspective, I was thinking, well, you know, it's going to be an event with the White House. It's going to be like, you know, like a big attack or something like that. Now, I was in work that night, and as I'm working, I'm thinking, well, nothing's really happened. Until I pick up the Daily Mirror newspaper, and I look at the front page, and I look at the headline, and the headline reads, on October the 13th, "The Bloodbath of the Bankers." So, you've got the Templars who set up the modern day banking system, rounded up, executed on a 1013. You've got the Shroud of Turin, which is likely that of the head of the Templars, and the Vatican come out on 1013, 1988, and proclaim that the shroud dates to around about that time. You have the Cornerstone laying ceremony for the White House on 1013. In Washington, D.C., you have in America all the banks being centralized further there, and the power of the United States economy being taken away from the United States, where the following appeared in the news. Bigger than 9/11. On Monday, October the 13th, Secretary Paulson and Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke invited the CEOs of our 9 biggest banks to a meeting in Washington, D.C. The CEOs were not told why. To their astonishment, they were each handed a one-page document that said they agreed to sell shares to the government. Then Paulson said they must sign it before they left. They argued, but they signed. The article goes on to note that just days earlier, Paulson had vigorously rejected this plan. Analysts say the United States was forced to shift policy in part because Britain and other European countries announced plans to recapitalize their banks and backstop bank lending. But unlike in Britain, the Treasury Secretary presented his plan as an offer the banks could not refuse. History will record this crisis as more important by far than 9/11. The 9/11 attacks left us with many choices. We chose badly: the Patriot Act, the invasion of Iraq. But we did the choosing. The world begged us to do otherwise. We told them to shove it. But when Sarkozy says we want a new world to come out of this, and Germany's finance minister adds that America will lose its role as financial superpower, that's the sound of a fat lady singing. The economic future of the United States is no longer in the hands of the United States. So there you go, there's the information, that's how it all links up. Conclusion: personally, would I say that it's ritual? No, I'd say it's synchronicity. If you look at my videos on here, there's a series of 9 videos about my own personal experiences called The Synchronicity of Oneness, and within there it talks about my own personal experiences, and if I was to be given odds of my story taking place by chance, the moderate odds would be at least 1,000,000,000 to 1. Within my own personal story, I've seen cycles from this year coexisting with events of last year, and then further still into a previous life 500 years ago. Even just recently, I see things which have come into play from my childhood, synchronistically at the same times, perfect timing, everything. There you go, check out the videos, have a look for yourself. Everything is some trippy shit. Keep asking why.